Join me now from Washington, D.C., representing Florida's 1st Congressional District, Congressman Matt Gaetz. Congressman, it's great to see you. Congressman, Krebs says that this is the most secure election in American history. What say you?
I don't know how Mr. Krebs could have made that claim. They're quite literally still finding tens of thousands of ballots in Georgia where there are discrepancies in the many thousands regarding those votes. And so while it may be true that a foreign actor didn't come and change vote totals, certainly what we've seen from the Dominion election software features and what we've seen from Wayne County, where you can't even make an accounting of the ballots against the registered voters, that would erode anyone's confidence in a result, and it would demand a more thorough look than Mr. Krebs would seem to suggest is necessary.
In the introduction, we were listening to some of the sound and interviews going on in Michigan from Wayne County. Now, they certified the election results. And in those interviews, we were hearing a lot of stuff about racism and this and that. Why do you think the Republicans caved on that?
I don't know why anyone would make the claim that a thorough review and accounting of ballots is a racist endeavor, or that the Republicans on that board were irredeemable human beings because they wanted to see, I think, the right process play out to ensure that we can all believe the results of the election. I don't like how this ended in Wayne County. I don't believe those results should have been certified. And there is a common theme here we see, Stephanie, where the Trump campaign has been successful in showing instances of fraud, but those don't always result in the remedies that would change what some believe is the outcome of the election. And so if the Trump campaign wants to build momentum, they're not only going to have to show the instances of fraud, like, for example, in Nevada, where they've got thousands of cases of people voting in more than one state, they actually have to show that that fraud will result in some change in the certification process, and they did not prevail in that regard in Wayne County.
Yeah, and you were talking about how thousands of votes have been found, a lot of them for Trump. And in Georgia, they uncovered another 2,700 missing votes. And yet still people try to tell us that there's nothing to see here. Voter fraud doesn't exist. This isn't an issue. What do you say to those who have zero questions about all of these ballots that are mysteriously reappearing?
Well, the state of Georgia has really become a mess. I mean, I don't know if they're going to be digging around in the Okefenokee swamp for quite some time to find ballots, but the Secretary of State there has lost the confidence of a number of state officials. And when you're this far from an election and you're still finding ballots, it shows that you need the full audit. This is all really, I think, circumstantial evidence of ballot laundering and ballot fraud, and it's why we need a far more thorough look than we've received. But some federal judge somewhere is going to have to demand that.
Yeah. What do you think President Trump's path to victory is? Obviously, some people are wondering what's going to happen. We're running out of time. People are very concerned, especially obviously President Trump supporters. The some 70 million Americans who supported President Trump in this election want to make sure that this was a free and fair election.
President Trump's path to victory would demand some action from state legislators unwilling to certify the results of elections if they still have serious doubts about the counting and recounting and accounting of the election process. One of the things that the Trump campaign must secure in court is a requirement that there be a review of signature matches. For example, in the state of Georgia in the 2018 election, 3.5% of absentee ballots were thrown out because signatures didn't match. In this last election, that was only 0.3%. And so obviously you've either got a circumstance where miraculously there has been a huge uptick in signature matches, or there's been a greater willingness to count mail-in ballots in the absence of those matches. And here what you're seeing is these mail ballots broke disproportionately for Democrats. And so you add elections officials far more willing to count them and not give them the scrutiny that they would require to ensure that the person whose name is on that ballot actually voted that ballot, and it wasn't just collected and laundered by a ballot harvester.
Yeah, and Matt, you were talking about the mess in Georgia when it comes to counting ballots, and we have the Senate runoffs that are happening, and this is going to be a very important battle, especially for Republicans if they want to keep the majority in the Senate. And Republicans have to realize what's at stake here. This is going to determine the direction of our country, and we know that the Democrats are going to fight tooth and nail for those seats. seats, and they've made it very clear. I know that Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez says she's even going to go down to Georgia to try to encourage people to go out there and support her candidates, which I don't think would really help in that case. I don't think the people of Georgia really care for Congresswoman AOC, but maybe I'm wrong.
I think it's a great idea for Alex to go on down to Georgia. We're very hospitable in the South, and if she spends a lot of time there, it may end up helping Republicans, but I hope she makes the trip. Georgia is all that stands between America and socialism, and while Republicans are focused on why people vote, I'm increasingly concerned that Democrats may be doing a better job looking at how people vote. Stacey Abrams is already bragging that there are over 600,000 mail-in ballot requests for this upcoming election. And so if we don't solve the problems from the 2020 presidential race, if we don't secure the voting process, then I think that there's a reason to be concerned that some of that same ballot laundering, some of that same fraud may present as well in these Senate races that are just so consequential to the future of our country.
Yeah. I want to shift gears here and ask you about the social media hearing that happened in the Senate this week. Your thoughts on that? I mean, we've seen Republicans over and over again grill these social media CEOs, yet nothing ever comes of it. So it's almost like political theater at this point. Do you think that finally something will be done?
Well, you've totally nailed it, Stephanie. Congress will never take on big tech because Congress is totally bought off by big tech. And when they don't buy off senators and representatives with campaign donations, they hire the family members of people in Congress. It's one of the reasons why I'm the only Republican in Congress that doesn't accept any PAC donations from any of these special interest groups. But big tech has really paralyzed any reform effort through their extensive lobbying. I believe that executive action at some point is going to be necessary. Action from the Federal Elections Commission and Federal Communications Commission are more likely to occur to create the type of freedom online that we would all expect in any other aspect of our lives.
Yeah, and if you listen to what some of the senators are saying, in a nutshell, the Republicans were saying there's too much censorship. We're worried about how you influence elections and who you're censoring, especially when it comes to government officials, including the President of the United States. And then we have the Democrats who are in a tizzy, wondering why these social media giants like Twitter and Facebook aren't censoring conservatives enough. And they made it very clear they were really upset that President Trump is allowed to tweet.
You know, the First Amendment doesn't just protect the speech we like. It sometimes protects speech that is offensive or confrontational to people. And while I don't want Washington, D.C. running my life, I sure as hell don't want Silicon Valley running my life. And if we allow these woke-topians out there to be able to define the four corners of debate in this country, then we won't be able to make progress on things like trade, immigration reform, tax reform, because our ideas will simply be excluded because some person at some tech company doesn't believe that they ought to be considered in the world that they want to create online. That's not the America that we should live in, and it's why we should be a lot more active. But frankly, I want to see less of the political theater and professional wrestling of these hearings and more actual legislating around the repeal of Section 230, which gives these tech companies special immunities that even this program that you host, that I'm a guest on right now, doesn't enjoy.
Yeah. Carson, how often do you get censored on Twitter? I think like every time I look at your tweets, it's like there's a little question mark box or some sort of little information snippet letting me know that this might not be accurate. And like you really have to click on it to see what you're tweeting about.
I'm one of only 4 members of Congress to have been shadow banned by Twitter. The others were Mark Meadows, Devin Nunes, and Jim Jordan. So you can figure out what that's about. Those of us who were fighting for the president, I guess, were deemed too effective by Jack Dorsey and the rest of the blue checkmark crew. But you're right. We've seen Twitter become even more aggressive about trying to frame and provide their own lens to what people are saying. I'm a congressman. I represent 700,000 people. I have the right to be able to communicate, and I'm certainly hopeful that all Americans will be able to enjoy that right and that we won't see this censorship and this crackdown become the new norm in our country.
Yeah, but if you're a brutal dictator spreading misinformation and propaganda, that's totally okay with these tech giants. And they've made it clear that they play dumb. They're like, oh, well, we didn't know, or we eventually took it down. But if you're Trump tweeting about something, you know, it's game over. Or if you're tweeting, they go after you. I wanted to get your reaction to the U.S. Pulling troops from Afghanistan by January 15th. Obviously, there's been some strong reactions on both sides, even including from Republicans.
If President Trump is able to wind down or end this war in Afghanistan, it will be in the first line of how history remembers his presidency. This is the longest war in America's history. We have been trading the same villages back and forth with the Taliban for 19 years, and if the neocons had their way in both political parties, they'd be over there engaged in a low-yield war for 19 more years with no perceivable end. We have spilled the blood of America's bravest patriots enough in these faraway deserts, in wherever-istan, and I'm grateful that President Trump wants to bring our bravest and our best home for Christmas, home after the new year, and hopefully this will reset our foreign policy to put our country and our people first, and we'll do it in a more focused way.
Yeah, this is a promise that President Trump made. He's keeping the promise. And you were talking about the holidays. Really quickly, I want to get your reaction to some of these lawmakers in some of the states are cracking down. They have new restrictions for Thanksgiving and for Christmas. Basically, some are suggesting that you shouldn't have more than 10 people. Some are suggesting you shouldn't have more than 6 people. I mean, in Florida, they're definitely not doing that.
No, in Florida, we actually believe in freedom, and it's one of the reasons so many people are coming to the Sunshine State. I mean, what's next, Steph? If the government could tell us how many people we can invite to Thanksgiving, are they going to dictate what's on the menu next? Are they going to tell us what kind of stuffing or mashed potatoes we can have at Thanksgiving or Christmas dinner? This is crazy. And you know what? It is just so unenforceable. The fact that even Gavin Newsom violated his own order, the fact that even the governor of Michigan's husband was out violating her orders, it just shows that government ought to have more humility. We ought to recognize that we cannot control every aspect of people's lives this way, and we ought to give people the information about distancing and sanitation and opportunities for testing to be more safe and secure around families. But these lockdowns are just deeply oppressive, and I think a lot of Americans are just going to ignore them and have a great Thanksgiving and love our family nonetheless.
Yeah, it's interesting. You hear people saying, oh, well, you can just do like a Zoom Thanksgiving, but obviously that's not the same. Well, Congressman, we're going to leave it here. Thank you.
How are you supposed to argue with your family? How are you supposed to argue with your family about politics over Zoom? Isn't that like an essential element of Thanksgiving dinner?
Yeah, you can't argue because there's a mute button, so they'll just mute you. But, Congressman, we're going to leave it here. Thank you.
Thank you, Steph.